Hey toy fans, Aaron here. Today, going to take a look at the POTF2 Deluxe Crowd Control Stormtrooper. Let's head to that table and check this one out. Now, this deluxe figure was released in 1996 as part of that Power of the Force 2 orange line. That card pretty much looks just like the 3 3/4 inch single releases, just a few inches wider to accommodate the extra accessory. Otherwise, though, of course, through the bubble, you do see the included figure and that thruster action pack thing there that it comes with. On the very bottom for the label, you got the Deluxe for the branding. Of course, the name of the figure being Crowd Control Stormtrooper, and then what it comes with. On the back side of the card, you got a lot to look at here. On the top third, I'd say, of the packaging is this index cutout of the bio information about this Stormtrooper, and a very lengthy write-up about his repulsor jetpack, crowd control stuff, what he's using this for. You can just hit pause, read that, and then hit play when you're ready to move on. To the right of that, you see a nice image of the actual toy itself with that jetpack on the back there. And then on the bottom 2/3 of the card, you got a lot of figures and vehicles that were also available at the time. More specifically being highlighted is the Shadows of the Empire line. You do get 3 images, though, showing you the 3 deluxe figures that were available, a couple of the small vehicles that were available, with the swoop bike being specifically in that Shadows of the Empire line, and then 2 vehicles being shown, with Dash Rendar's vehicle being part of that Shadows of the Empire line. And then to the right of that, you got the comic book 2-packs that were released for Shadows of the Empire, along with the single-carded figures that also came out. Moving on first to look at the figure itself, and I do believe, aside from all the black specks that are in this thing, I guess to make it look dirty, which, as I've mentioned before, I was not a fan of these black speckles throughout. They used it on the vehicles, and they used it on some of these figures. Just not a fan of that look, and thankfully that went away. But anyways, I do believe that aside from that, this is the very same sculpt and figure that was released on the single card. Obviously, as I've mentioned a few times, as many of you are probably aware, the figures in that Power of the Force 2 line, when it initially launched, they were much beefier. And certainly the Stormtrooper, as you can see, is no exception. He's got a very beefed up look. And his legs have been sculpted in a little bit more of an action-oriented pose, where they're bent, one can stick out in front of the other. Unfortunately, at least for me, it makes it very hard to get this figure to stand up. So he's looking a little weird, but that's the way I was able to get him to stand up on this turntable. Looking in closer on the helmet, as I mentioned, the figure's a bit beefier, and the helmet certainly is a little bit wider to accommodate that sculpt also. So it is a bit odd looking, but aside from that, the sculpt itself of the way the helmet should look and the paint application to the helmet does seem to be a very good representation of what it should be, or what we saw in the movies. The black painting along the brow of the helmet is pretty decent. Little bit of overpaint there above one of the eyes. But aside from that, the little bits of gray are painted in pretty nicely. The black stripes along the sides of the helmet are looking pretty good. The sculpting for the armor through the arms and the chest area, again, still looks pretty representative of what we would see. Through that arm area, you do have some black painted in, pretty much where you would expect to see it. You got it at the top of the bicep, at the elbow area, and then for the black gloves. At the chest area, not entirely accurate, since you would see some black through the sides, but I still think the figure looks fine without it. I mean, it's what you expect to see, a mostly white trooper, and that's what we got here. You do have some black dots, as you can see, on the abdomen area of the Stormtrooper, of the costume. On his back area, one thing that's different from the carded release is that he does have this big hole sculpted into his back, and that's to accommodate this jetpack that snaps on in there. Through the belt area, it's pretty close to what you would expect to see on a Stormtrooper. The holsters that would be on the side of his belt, though, are just sculpted into the legs. So you kind of, if you blink, you miss it. You're not going to really notice that they're sculpted there. And even on the backside of his belt, you got a little bit of that canister sculpted in. And then through the legs, I mean, it's Stormtrooper legs. It's exactly what you would expect the armor to look like. So they did a pretty good job with the sculpt of that. You do have some black peeking out from the back area of the kneecaps, and then even some black painted in for the bottom of the shoes. As for the articulation, everything pretty standard for the time. That head just swivels all the way around. Both arms do go all the way around. You got your swiveling at the waist area, and then both legs come pretty much straight out. And the way his butt is sculpted, they only go back about so far, which I don't care about that. And here's his jetpack crowd control accessory that he comes with. It is pretty cool looking. First, because it's probably going to fall off anytime soon. Each of these little arm things are on these little rubber tubings, and they just slide right on here onto this point. So this one's probably keeps falling off as I've been recording. So if it falls, it falls. But anyways, this arm thing here looks like it's out of the Aliens movies, but it's pretty cool looking. Lots of nice detailing to the sculpt to it. It's got a little action feature here where you push this button and that claw will open and close. And of course, as you can see, that bottom part of the claw does have some pretty nice yellow painting to it. Kind of like a dark silver for the rest of this arm. Aside from that, though, no like, special wash or anything. I mean, that stuff just wasn't happening really at the time. This handle here, that does fit nicely into his hand that you'll see on the turntable in a moment. And then for the other arm, I'm guessing this is just a laser cannon. Kind of looks like right off the X-Wing or something, just a lot smaller. You got some sculpting into that, but otherwise, like I said, no special weathering or anything. And no action features to this. This handle here is just going to go into his hand. For the inside of the back area, that's the peg that slides into his back. And then these little braces or whatever just fit nicely around the hip area. Little shoulder cannon mount or something. I don't know. We can call it whatever we want, right? I don't know what all these little parts are. At the bottom of it, some nice silver painting here for, I don't know, some sort of hydraulics or something like that. Little silver painting here on these little knobs of whatever those would be. This is quite the detailed review, huh? And then for the jetpack part of it on this back side here, pretty nice sculpting to it. Little bits of detailing here on each side of the engines. And then as you can see, sticking out here, you got a little bit of copper color painting to that. Down here, you got a little action button, so when you push that, those will flip out. And this just reveals some red paint throughout here, giving a little bit more detailing. And then through these little engine pieces, you just see more copper color painting. So pretty nice looking through this area. And overall, as a little, making this a deluxe figure, as a mini rig piece, whatever you want to call it, I think this is pretty cool looking. And because of the length of this thing, it helps the figure stand up. So it's not falling over because of it. It certainly adds a lot of playability to the figure, even though we never saw this in the movie. And I'm just not that familiar with all the expanded universe stuff at the time to know. Like, I don't know if this was taken from one of the books or something. Maybe this is a design that does indeed exist or has been talked about. But to my knowledge, this is a pretty original take for this figure. But like I said, I could certainly be wrong. So I think overall this works really well as a toy. As for my overall thoughts on the Stormtrooper, I mean, hey, at the time, I was just pretty excited to get Stormtroopers, so as far as that sculpting goes, I didn't really care too much, but I have to say that it was one of my least favorite figures out of that initial wave. And certainly with this one, I'm just not a fan of those black speckles, as I've already mentioned. And I'm certainly glad that years later, we got much better looking Stormtroopers released. And so that wraps up this look at the Deluxe Crowd Control Stormtrooper. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this figure in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching.